Hello everyone, this is The World Today, our final edition for the week. I'm Joke Rogers. Coming up on the program, President Vladimir Putin has taken the center stage at Russia's Victory Day parade, surrounding himself by friendly world leaders in a highly choreographed show. The new Catholic Pope celebrates first Mass as Pontiff in the Sistine Chapel, saying he hopes his election can help the Catholic Church bring light to the dark nights of this world. Plus, the world's first drone war between nuclear-armed neighbors India and Pakistan erupts in South Asia. Welcome again, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers. Here in Lagos, Russia and Ukraine have accused one another of violating a three-day ceasefire as Moscow marked Victory Day by welcoming allies to a grand military parade. Russia's President Vladimir Putin marked the 80th anniversary of victory over Nazi Germany on Friday alongside China's Xi Jinping in an event clearly intended to bolster support for his three-year offensive against Ukraine, which he had unilaterally paused for 72 hours to mark the occasion.
Vladimir Putin leads Russia's Victory Day commemorations with a parade in Red Square amid heightened security after days of Ukrainian strikes targeting the capital. His close ally, China's Xi Jinping, joined Mr. Putin as he told thousands of soldiers and more than 20 international leaders that Russia remembers the lessons of World War II. President Putin used his speech to tie the war to today's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and said all of Russia was behind what he called the special military operation, now well into its fourth year.
Великой победы! Ура!
For the first time, a column of trucks carrying various combat drones took part in the Victory Day parade, perhaps because of their wide-scale use in Ukraine. A unilateral three-day ceasefire was announced by Russia to coincide with the lavish 80th anniversary event, which Ukraine has rejected and called a theatrical show. Heavy security and restrictions are in place in the center of Moscow as Russia marked the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. Before Mr. Putin's address and a one-minute silence, 11,000 troops marched into Red Square, including some 1,500 who had fought in Ukraine. They were then inspected by Russia's defense minister. President Putin insists that Russia was and will be an indestructible barrier against Nazism, Russophobia, anti-Semitism. The Russian leader has repeatedly referred to Ukraine's leadership as Nazis. Russia says 27 world leaders attended the event, but it was the presence of China's leader alongside Mr. Putin and more than 100 Chinese soldiers marching on Red Square that stood out.
Китайской Народной Республики возглавляет парадный строй старший полковник.
Russian state TV spoke of relations between the two countries as being their highest ever level, united against what they called collective West. For Putin, the attendance of China's Xi on Victory Day is seen as a significant achievement, and he praised the courageous people of China as he paid tributes to Russia's allies in World War II. Thousands of North Koreans have fought against Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk region, and President Putin made a point of personally greeting some of the soldiers on Red Square, hugging one highly decorated officer.
대통령님 높은 평가에 사의를 표합니다.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un visited the Russian embassy in Pyongyang to highlight his country's increasing ties with Moscow. Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro were among the assembled guests, along with Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Robert Fico, Slovakia's Prime Minister, who is the only European Union leader to travel to Moscow. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas had earlier made clear that leaders of EU member states and countries aspiring to join the Union should not take part in the event because of Russia's war in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, activists and community members have gathered in Hamburg to commemorate Victory Day with a celebration honoring the defeat of fascism in 1945, calling for renewed commitment to diplomacy and remembrance. Community members shared stories as performers sing on stage and attendees waved flags, all combined with Second World War reenactments. They stressed the importance of cultural events like this one in countering rising nationalism and preserving historical truth. One of the organizers, Christine Bommard, recalls her father's experience on the Eastern Front and her own journey towards reconciliation through peace initiatives. May 8, 2025 marks the 80th anniversary of Victory Day, with events around the world commemorating the pivotal moment that ended World War II in Europe.
Bayerischer Nationalheld. Folgenden ansprechen. Zitat: Der Staat Preußen, truppigen Braun und unter der Kollegen.
Well, amid the 80th Victory Day celebration in Russia, a drone strike on the Belgorod government administration building located in the region bordering Ukraine was caught on camera. Russian Defense Ministry says it has recorded a total of 5,026 ceasefire violations by the AFU. Kyiv is yet to comment on the UAV strike on the Belgorod region government building. A summary from the Ukrainian Armed Forces General Staff says that Ukrainian troops were actively undermining the enemy's offensive capacity in the rear, although it did not clarify the location. Meanwhile, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Ling Jian says its country's position on the Ukraine crisis is unchanged. The remarks come after the joint statement from President Xi and Mr. Putin, noting that the Ukraine conflict can only be settled by removing its root causes. President Putin also stated that the two countries would stand together against neo-Nazism. Let's get more on this. Joining us now is an international development analyst, Jude Asiebu, who speaks to us from New York. Thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so given Russia's current geopolitical situation, this doesn't seem to affect or influence the tone of this year's celebration, with several world leaders in attendance, most notably China's Xi Jinping.
Absolutely, it doesn't, and we didn't expect it to be because of the particular national interest between China and Russia. You have to understand that there is a very big shift in international discourse with respect to the resurgence of totalitarianism in order to combat liberalism. So we always expect China and authoritarian countries like China, Russia, maybe Iran and North Korea to be on the same bed. So that is nothing surprising.
And with today's military parade and celebration, what message do you think Russian President Vladimir Putin aims to convey through the Victory Day celebrations, particularly in the context of the current geopolitical tensions?
Unfortunately, Russia have managed to find itself in a very tight spot geopolitically. Because of the miscalculation, which is the invasion of Ukraine, what I called from the inception as a very big miscalculation. It has found itself in the need in order to rally popularity internally. It needs to do that. There has been reports of attrition in the military, demoralization of the Russian people with respect to the war. So Putin has a very invested interest to rally the population, and that is in the internally. Also, in the external aspect of it, he has the interest for force projection, and to also, which will enable it to counter the narrative, the Western narrative that of Russian isolation. So there is a dual interest here, rally internal support and also project an image of national isolation, that the counter the image of isolation that the West has propagated against Russia.
And how does Russia's commemoration of Victory Day reflect on its stance on World War II history, particularly narratives it hopes to emphasize or downplay amid the ongoing war with Ukraine?
That's a very interesting question. You see, the end of the World War II marks the emergence of Russia as a superpower. And that is a history that Putin doesn't want to distance itself from. He has called the dismantling of the Soviet Union as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And it has a very particular relevance. The defeat of the Nazi has particular resonance to him because of his experience and family experience in the war. So not only are we dealing with somebody that has retained his former Soviet ideology, but he also has that interest in order to project in order to project Russian power geopolitically. And this is why you see him harassing some of the countries in Western and Eastern Europe, and you see him now in Ukraine. There is a much more bigger picture in it, but it's very volatile, but bigger picture.
And do you think there are, implications of Victory Day on Russia's relationships with other countries? We know there were many world leaders in attendance, but particularly those with different historical narratives or current geopolitical rivalries.
Yes, of course. That is what I'm trying to tell you. There is, you see, after the end of the Second World War, the United States emerged as the unipolar power in the whole world, and he has used that opportunity to project its influence and to project liberal democracy, which some of the countries now are seeing what they perceive to be an excess of liberalism, and they are pushing back, championed by China and Soviet Union. So you see some of the countries that are persuaded by what they see as American loss of moral compacts. So they're looking for a new leader, and China is trying to foot that bill. The most important question is, how does Africa play into the whole narrative? And in particular, how does Nigeria see an opportunity in all this? What is Nigerian grand strategy in pursuing and coming into and answering some of these questions? Our leaders, are we seeing this opportunity, and what are we doing about it? Because there is a lot going on right now in world politics, and there is a dynamic shift, a very big swift shift in international politics. How can Africa benefit from it? The world is looking for a new leader, and it's a combat between totalitarianism and liberalism. Where do we stand? How do we fit into that narrative is a very big question.
Right. And, another question is about the ceasefire and unilateral ceasefire that President Vladimir Putin declared just to mark the Victory Day celebration. But a few hours ago, a drone strike on the Belgorod government administration building located in the region bordering Ukraine was caught on camera. Although Ukraine has not officially commented on the incident, both sides have previously been accused of violating the ceasefires. Could this attack have come from Ukraine?
Well, anything is possible. You see, you have to understand that when Ukraine has not officially taken any to do difference to them, they have not taken any responsibility for that attack. Could it have been? Yes. Could it not have been? Yes. Could Ukraine, does it benefit Ukraine? Yes. But there is something that I want to point out. There is a lack of distrust in in this discussion. This is why I am skeptical about them reaching any objective ceasefire or resolution to this conflict. There is a complete lack of trust. There is also what you will see as a fog of war. Okay, when the war is very fluid, perhaps there might be some fringe group due to lack of communication or whatever the case may be, or miscommunication, and they decide to, take that action. That doesn't necessarily represent the position of the Ukrainian government. So the most important thing is trying to find out what happened. There could be also covert operations. There could be also false flags. We don't know. All these things are possible, but none is alleged. But it's important to get to the root of it, to find out where it's from before we could make any objective comment on it.
One of the most obvious leaders at the V-Day celebration was the Chinese President Xi Jinping. And just weeks ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused China of supplying weapons to Russia. At this celebration, we've also heard of North Korea having boots on the ground in Ukraine. Do you think the ceasefire will hold for very long?
I'm very pessimistic to the extent that the demands, first of all, remember I highlighted the lack of trust in both sides, which makes things very, very difficult. Why did Reagan and George Bush able to deal with Gorbachev? Because they developed trust. There is a lack of trust here. Both leaders doesn't trust each other. And there is also the demand. Russia doesn't want to back away in shame, so it's making so much demand. You can't be coming to the table and then claiming to have to be given what is next to be negotiated. So there is no good faith effort. And that lack of good faith, perception of lack of good faith, makes the idea of sustaining peace very intractable.
Right. International development analyst Jude Asebu, thank you for your time again on The World Today.
Thank you for having me.
In the meantime, Ukraine says it has uncovered a spy network being run by the Hungarian state to obtain intelligence about its defenses near their shared border. Ukraine's security service claims that it had detained two alleged Hungarian spies who it accused of gathering intelligence. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said the allegations should be treated carefully as propaganda until such time as it receives any more details or official information about the situation. Well, China's a fleet of Russian oil thieves which have been used to avoid existing sanctions on oil and gas exports are set to be hit with new restrictions. The UK government says action will be taken against up to 100 vessels which have carried more than £18 billion worth of cargo since the start of 2024. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer vows that the country will do everything in its power to destroy Russian President Vladimir Putin's shadow fleet operation, starve his war machine of oil revenues, and protect the subsea infrastructure. And the European Commission plans to cut its energy ties with Russia entirely by 2027, and it unveiled its roadmap to do that this week. But experts are warning that the EU may struggle to wean itself from the Russian energy. Well, joining us with more is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Chiponda, great to see you. What about the plan has attracted skepticism?
Quite straightforward, at least on paper. Now, first, the EU will ban new gas contracts with Russian suppliers by the end of this year, and then it will phase out the remaining gas imports by 2027, and that is where the challenge lies. Now, many EU countries still import large amounts of Russian energy, so experts are skeptical about the plan and whether businesses will be able to go along with it. Now, while overall fossil fuel imports from Russia to the EU have fallen since the 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine, There is one major exception, and that is liquefied natural gas, LNG. Now, imports of Russian LNG to the EU rose 18% last year, according to the European Statistics Office.
Right, and so how realistic is the EU's plan?
Experts we spoke with pretty much said that the plan isn't very realistic. Now, so far, LNG hasn't been part of the EU sanctioned packages against Russia, and imports of Russian LNG for domestic EU consumption have been allowed despite there being a ban on shipments to countries outside the bloc. So some EU countries have actually been buying more Russian natural gas. And the bloc could, of course, try to change that. It could very well buy more LNG from the United States, which is already its biggest supplier. But that could also make the EU more dependent on the US, which, of course, in recent months has become a less reliable partner.
And what needs to be done, Chipendo, what needs to happen for the EU to proceed with its exit from Russian energy?
Well, one thing for sure is that the EU needs to reduce its overall gas consumption. That would definitely ease the bloc's exit from Russian fossil fuels. And that would mean that the question wouldn't just be about replacing one partner or one supplier with the other. And there's, of course, fears of depending too much on one supplier, because, of course, that's not unfounded given the experience with Russia. Now, whether the EU Commission's plan will be supported by the bloc's member states, that is, of course, something that remains to be seen. There may be resistance from countries like Hungary, Slovakia, and Austria, because they are still very much reliant on Russian gas imports. And, of course, Washington, too, may chime in. It may also want the EU to resume buying Russian gas if it does succeed at brokering a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. So there's a lot of interest here at play, and we will have to wait and see what happens.
Right, DW correspondent there speaking to us from Berlin. And still to come on the program. U.S. President Donald Trump calls election of the first American Pope a great honor for the country, saying he looks forward to meeting him. Welcome back. The new Pope, Leo XIV, has called for the Catholic Church to desperately counter a lack of faith in his first Mass at the Vatican. Speaking the day after he was elected as the 267th Pope and first U.S. leader of the Church, he warned that people were turning away from faith and instead to technology, money, success, power, or pleasure. Pope Leo said he had been elected to be a faithful administrator of a church that would act as a beacon that illuminates the dark nights of this world. In his sermon on Friday, the new Pope said there were many settings where the Christian faith was considered absurd, with power, wealth, and technology dominating. But it was precisely there that missionary outreach was needed. Pope Leo, 69, wore a white papal robe trimmed in gold as he addressed the seated cardinals in the Sistine Chapel, an event broadcast live by the Vatican administration. Well, Robert Francis Cardinal Prevost emerged as the new leader of the Catholic Church on Thursday after his election by 133 cardinals who voted a fourth time since Wednesday at the Vatican. The 69-year-old is America's first ever pope and will be known as Pope Leo XIV. Our correspondent Amarachi Ubani reports.
It has been almost 2 days since the 133 cardinals of the Catholic Church entered conclave to elect a new pope, knowing only one of them would emerge as pope. A crowd gathered at St. Peter's Square, anxiously awaiting the announcement. A false alarm in the afternoon raised hopes a decision had been made, until the definitive white smoke billowed from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel where the cardinals were. About an hour later, the senior cardinal appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and announced the famous words, Habemus Papam, Latin for, we have a new pope, and introduced the new pontiff by his chosen papal name, Leo XIV.
Habemus Papam. Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost. Qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
Then another waiting period before Pope Leo XIV emerged on the balcony with a blessing. May peace be with all of you, to the joy of hundreds gathered.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
He thanked the cardinals who elected him during the two-day conclave and continued with a message of peace.
This is the peace of the risen Christ.
Disarmata e una pace disarmante.
A peace that is disarming and humble and persevering.
Proviene da Dio.
It comes from
Dio
God.
che ci ama a tutti.
God who loves all of us
incondizionalmente.
without any limits and conditions.
Ancora conserviamo nei nostri orecchi
And
quella voce debole ma sempre
we still have
coraggiosa
the
di
sound in
Papa
our ears
Francesco
of the weak
che
voice of Pope
benediva
Francis,
Roma.
who is blessing Rome here.
He concluded his first speech by switching back to Italian, leading the people in a quick prayer, which is greeted by further cheering.
Et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.
After which he read a religious passage in Latin, paying homage to the saints and the Madonna. The Chicago-born Pope Leo, the 267th Bishop of Rome, is seen as a reformer and who worked for many years as a missionary in Peru before being made an archbishop there. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Well, his ascension has been celebrated by the world's 1.4 billion Catholics with joyous outbursts in the U.S. homeland, in his U.S. homeland, and in Peru, where he served for 20 years. Peruvians in Lima gave their opinions after the Catholic Church elected Pope Leo as its new spiritual leader. Veronica Guisi, one of the believers, said that she was super excited to hear the cathedral bells, and the bishop, who was Peruvian, in the conclave that he eventually became Pope. Prevost was born in Chicago in 1955 and obtained Peruvian citizenship in 2015. He served as Bishop of Chiclayo until 2023, when he assumed duties at the Vatican as a prefect of the dicastery for bishops. Let's speak now to Reverend Sister Bellarmine Azuma, a professor and graduate program director, journalism and mass communication at Murray State University in Kentucky, United States. Thank you for joining us on the program.
I'm pleased to be here.
Right, so how do you feel with the election of a new pope who is the first ever American?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm sure many were as well. It was really a wonderful news when that was announced yesterday. And it wasn't just the first American born, but he had a few other firsts, you know. He is the first Augustinian to become Pope. You know, it was really wonderful. Church bells were ringing here in the United States. And of course, his alma mater, Villanova University in Pennsylvania, were just beside themselves. And last night, the Empire State Building in New York was lit with gold and white in honor of his papacy. So it was an overall joyful news.
Would you say that it's interesting that the new pope comes from America at the time the President Donald Trump assumed office for his second term?
Yes, it's an interesting development for United States, but I would like to point out that he wasn't elected Pope only just because he was American-born. He had so many accolades in his bag. He was a servant leader, in many positions. But coming to United States, yes, I think it's is an icing on the cake, because when you look at the Catholic population here in United States, it's actually declining. The last Pew Research poll found that as at last year, about 19% of the population of the United States identify as Catholics, as opposed to about a quarter, 24% in 2007. So it is a good thing, and it's an interesting thing. And who knows, maybe it will boost the population of Catholics in the United States once more. I was speaking with a friend of mine yesterday. He said, actually, that, it feels like living in a little village, because this friend of mine, knows Pope Leo XIII very well. He said he feels like, living in a village, and then all of a sudden one of you becomes a priest. Definitely, it will strengthen the faith. So I am bringing the same analogy to United States and hoping probably it will positively impact the American population. Now, coming to United States and under the presidency of Donald Trump, a lot of things are going on. We have lots of agitation in terms of immigration, in terms of race, gender, socioeconomic status. Yes, I think Pope Leo XIV is a welcome development in terms of all these social, perhaps injustices. Given his name, Pope Leo XIV, taken after Pope Leo XIII, and knowing that Pope Leo XIII actually was the one that promulgated a lot of Catholic social teachings. And those teachings, human dignity, solidarity, participating, having the right to participate, dignity of work, and good conditions and good pay for workers. These are, problems that are facing United States of America. But also I can even extend it to the rest of the world. So yes, having this Pope at this moment is a good development.
Right. Apart from the things that you listed about the virtues and what he hopes to continue from the Pope Leo XIII, what else can we expect in the future from his spiritual leadership?
Well, given the experiences he's had so far, I would say he has tested every facet of religious leadership. He's, as I said, he is an Augustinian. He has served as the local superior of his community, regional superior of his community, general superior of his community. He has served as a pastor, as a bishop, as a missionary, as a formator, all in Peru. So I'm sure he's going to bring in all this wealth of knowledge, but also, most importantly, he has that humility. He has the servant leadership skills. And also, he is somebody that is very assertive, and he's not afraid to correct and to confront. Not confront in a very bad way, but to confront in a way to teach. An example of that is, and I'm sure we know about, when the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, gave a different interpretation of what Jesus meant when he says, love your neighbor. J.D. Vance actually has said, Jesus instructs us to love ourselves first, to love our family next, to love our community next, to love the world next. So he was quick to interject, and he said no. When Jesus said to love your neighbor as yourself, there was no ranking. He actually cited, of course, the parable where somebody, the person who fell on the street, and the person that actually helped them, helped the guy, was not the person from the family or from the community. It was an outsider. So I like that he's very assertive, and I like that he is somebody who will see something that is going awry, and he will be quick to interject and to correct. And I think that is the kind of leadership that he will bring. Also, I think the kind of leadership that he will bring is the leadership of peace and hope. We saw yesterday that his first words were, "Peace be with you." And that is what we are, expecting that he will bring in, to actually instill, because the Catholic social teachings, they are there, but I think we need to resurrect it. And for him to choose that name, Pope Leo XIV, and I'm sure he is going to focus on those social teachings, because we need it in today's day and age. We need peace and care for the poor. And he worked most of his life, with the poorest of the poor in Peru, and the marginalized, So that is the kind of leadership I think we will expect from him. And I'm sure he will deliver.
Right, so rightly so. And, I might just chip in that, President Donald Trump says he hopes to meet with the new Pope soon. He said it's a great honor that the world now has a new Catholic leader, a leader of the Catholic Church that's American. What do you expect, those kind of meetings would be like, the kind of discussions that may take place should President Trump indeed meet the new Pope?
Well, I am sure that the new Pope definitely will welcome the president, and I'm sure it will be an honor for President Trump. And I don't know in what manner or the time, they will meet, but I think from what we've seen so far from Pope Leo XIV, he will be quick to also provide some advice, especially on how things are going in the United States. And he's very in touch with his people. And I know that when the infamous story of George Floyd happened in Minnesota, he actually posted in his social media page about what's going on. And given that he's aware of everything happening in the United States, I'm pretty sure that Pope Leo XIV will have some words of advice to President Trump.
All right, we'll be back with it shortly. We'll just go on a short break on the program, and when we return, hundreds of visitors have gathered at the Fuji Motoshuko Resort during the annual Fujisaba Festival, one of Japan's most popular events, drawn by the breathtaking pink moss fields. Welcome back. Let's wrap up our discussion with Reverend Sister Bellarmine Ezuma on the emergence of a new pope. We were just talking about, what to expect if the new Pope and the U.S. President Donald Trump should meet. Of course, Americans are excited about the fact that a new Pope is American. Also, the people of Peru are super elated that someone that has, they know so well is also the new Pope. But that's from, those two countries. The rest of the world, the Catholics, are also happy to have someone, a new leadership. What can the rest of the world expect from Pope Leo, the leadership they hope that he will bring to them?
Well, we We hope that he will bring a leadership that will restore peace, restore hope, restore more people believing in the Catholic faith, especially in the Western world and particularly in the United States. Yes, we've had a few incidences where people left the church, but being that the Holy Father now is from the United States, I am sure he will instill that virtue of family, of community, of participation. And also we are hoping that being a missionary, he's traveled the world. He knows the poor, he knows the rich. So he knows the sufferings of the people. And we hope it is someone who will also increase and implement that participation. And you know, Pope Francis actually did that in a way. Participation by every human being, every Catholic, you know, both men and women. And also, we are hoping that he will be someone who will be also all-embracing, embracing everyone, irrespective of your age, of your gender, of your socioeconomic status, of your class, and of your race. So that's what we are hoping that he will bring.
Right. Thank you. Thank you again for your time, Reverend Sister Bellarmine Ezuma, a professor and graduate program director, journalism and mass communication at the Murray State University in Kentucky, the United States.
Thank you.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has indeed called the election of the first American Pope a great honor for the country and said he looks forward to meeting him. Mr. Trump is among the many American political figures applauding the historic appointment of Leo XIV, who is taking his name from Leo XIII to lead the Catholic Church. Well, the white smoke came out of the Vatican yesterday, and the new Pope, Leo XIV, was named. He's an American born from Chicago, Illinois. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more on his impact on the Catholic Church in the United States.
The Catholic Church has elected a new pope, Leo XIV, as he is the first American-born pope. The Catholic bishop out of Chicago says that even though Pope Leo XIV is American-born, he is the world's pope.
So I would say, once again, the Pope Leo XIV is a child of God first and foremost. I would say that he is going to live that out in very predictable ways, standing up. In terms of nationalism, obviously, the Pope is the spiritual leader of 1.2 billion people. He's going to be speaking for them, and the people of God are not confined to national boundaries. He is not an American at this point. He's a child of God.
It is believed that Pope Leo XIV will continue the legacy of Pope Francis by giving voice to the voiceless and advocating for the poor.
I think it's very important that the Pope does speak up for the voiceless. I think it's important for the Pope to speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. And I think that Pope Francis was certainly someone who cared for those who were living on the fringes, who could easily be forgotten. And I strongly suspect that Pope Leo XIV will do the same thing. He will give voice to the voiceless. And I think that really is our responsibility.
The Catholic Church believes that Pope Leo XIV's role as Pope will be critical during these times, as kindness, love, and social justice are core values that they hope he will instill.
So I really do believe that the popes do serve as a wonderful example of what it means to be kind, compassionate, caring people. And so people who are not Catholic, people who are not Christian, people of all denominations, I think, can look to the Holy Father as someone who really serves as an example of what it means to care for those who might seem forgotten. And just like we look to other spiritual leaders and we look to their example of what it means to be a people of dignity and respect, making sure that everyone receives the dignity and respect that God will want for all of his children.
While the role of Pope is a global role for spiritual leadership, it is a historic moment for Americans as he is the first American-born Pope. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
And let's take a look at what's happening on the streets of America. We've heard from the leaders and other reactions. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now for this reaction. Maria, great to hear from you. Paint us a picture of the excitement and joy yesterday when the first ever American Pope was named.
The excitement, I think, spread across the United States. It'll be very interesting to watch how the Catholic Church grows over the years. It was from the Catholic University in Washington, D.C., all the way through where he was born in Chicago. There are many services happening over this week to celebrate this assignment that he has received. And as America typically does not find themselves in these positions, I think this is a moment in history where Americans are looking to their spiritual lives and really realizing the importance. And as you heard in the piece mentioning that he serves as an example for the world. And so America is very excited to be in that position, to have an American-born serving as a spiritual leader within the world.
From the president, calling it a great honor for the United States. How do ordinary citizens feel?
Ordinary citizens, I think, are excited. They are, more than anything, I think that in the times that we're in, where people are really feeling financial crunches, or people are feeling sometimes a bit lonely, I think that his focus on advocacy, social justice, and obviously being what they're assuming will be similar to Pope Francis, I think is an eye-opening and a warm welcome by many Americans, and a reminder of a focus on those. Obviously, he has a focus on the poor and those who oftentimes don't have as much as others.
This must be the shortest interview with you, Maria. Have to let you go, running out of time, but thank you again for joining us from Washington for that reaction from Americans. Well, elsewhere, the world's first drone war between nuclear-armed neighbors has erupted in South Asia. On Thursday, India accused Pakistan of launching waves of drones and missiles at 3 military bases in Indian territory and Indian-administered Kashmir, an allegation Islamabad swiftly denied. Pakistan claimed it had shot down 25 Indian drones in recent hours, but Delhi remained publicly silent. Experts say the tit-for-tat attacks mark a dangerous new phase in the decades-old rivalry as both sides exchange not just artillery but unmanned weapons across a volatile border. As Washington and other global powers urge restraint, analysts believe the region is teetering on the edge of escalation, with drones silent, remote and deniable, opening a new chapter in the India-Pakistan conflict. Tensions between the two nuclear-armed neighbors reached a breaking point after last month's incident in Indian-controlled Kashmir that saw 26 people killed by gunmen. India blamed Pakistan and suspended a key water treaty and visa scheme, while Islamabad strongly denied any involvement. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters took part in a demonstration organized by the MQM group to condemn Indian strikes on Pakistan. Demonstrators gathered carrying Pakistani flags and chanting slogans in support of Pakistan's armed forces. On Tuesday, India conducted strikes on what they called terrorist infrastructure and hit 9 sites in Pakistan and the Pakistan-administered Kashmir, from where terrorist attacks against India have been planned and directed. According to India's Defense Minister Ranjit Singh, the strike, known as Operation Sindoor, killed at least 100 terrorists. And finally, on the program, hundreds of visitors gathered at Fuji Motosuko Resort during the annual Fujisaba Festival, one of Japan's most popular events, drawn by the breathtaking pink moss fields. Aerial footage of the stunning festival, also known as the Fuji Flower Festival, reveals vast fields of pink moss extending to the horizon, set against the majestic backdrop of Mount Fuji. Visitors are exploring the park stalls that are selling pots of pink moss, souvenirs, food, and local produce, enhancing the experience. According to Fuji Motosuko Resort manager Ken Suzuki, approximately 500,000 stalks of Shibazakura in 5 varieties create delightful displays of pink, white and purple hues. The breathtaking scenery draws large crowds as visitors enter the venue in the northern foothills. They stroll in an orderly fashion, taking photos as they explore the Peter Rabbit English Garden, the Dragon God Pond, and a small boat nestled in the sea of pink moss. The festival typically runs from mid-April to late May or early June. The best viewing time varies each year, but usually falls within the first 3 weeks of May. This year, the festival is held from April 12 to May 25. That's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.